Hi, good morning again, grade 12s. We're starting this new section, which is settlement geography. And when we look at settlements, what we're essentially studying is we're looking at where people stay, and then, of course, why are they in those places. What's also important about that is what the world's population is doing. So this here is more for interest's sake. If we look at the first billion people, were counted in 1804. 123 years later, there was only the second billion people in the world. After that, the third billion was 33 years later, then 14 years later, 13 years later, and so on. So the population is growing exponentially. So many more people, and they need space to stay. I had a look at the statistics today, and as of April 2020, the world population is standing at 7.7 billion, and South Africa has got just over 5.9 million people living here. So we look at the classification of settlements. They're classified according to size of the settlement itself, size of the population, and then also the function. So if we look at this classification here, this is based on size. So we go from the smallest one right up to the biggest one. We start with a farmstead. And what's interesting here is in map work, this would be seen as a single dot, normally with cultivated lands or something like that around it. So here you'd have just one farm and a couple of the outbuildings, possibly one family staying there. So it's more than one household, but just one family. Loose grouping. Hamlet would be a loose grouping of a few farmsteads sort of together, and you've got a little more functionality. A village, you have a couple of houses, people perhaps not all involved in farming, so again a little more functionality, but the majority of people would still be involved just in one function. Then we move over to the classification of urban. So here we're talking about towns, population of between 2,000 to 100,000 persons. A city is something like Polokwane, where we've got up to a million people. In South Africa, we also still have the metropolis, and there are only 3 of them here in South Africa. So it would be Cape Town, Durban, and Port Elizabeth, between 1 and 2 million people. A conurbation, we have 1 in South Africa, and that would be Pretoria, Johannesburg, the whole sort of, and Vereeniging. We sometimes refer to it as the PWV region, or otherwise known as the Witwatersrand. Megalopolis we don't have in South Africa. Here we're looking at North America, the sort of eastern seaboard sort of region, New York, Washington, and so on. So we talk about 2 other things when we're looking at the study of settlement. We talk about the situation and the site. So if we look at situation first, situation is referring to a settlement in relation to something else. So for example, the example you've got here is the settlement is on a flat plateau, or the settlement is 5 kilometers away from the closest town. Something like that. So you're referring to it in relation to something else. Now, the site of a rural settlement, this is more to do with the actual reason why the settlement started in the first place. We call these site factors. And the site factors are these as listed here. The availability of drinking water. You must imagine this as somebody arriving in a place and deciding, all right, this is where I'm going to stop and this is where I'm going to stay. So we have to have drinking water. Humans cannot live without available drinking water. Building materials. You would have to have been able to build yourself homes. So you would need things like rocks, trees, forests, clay, soil that you could use as building materials, and so on. Arable land. Arable land means land that you can grow crops on. Transport routes, sort of pathways, roads, rivers, even perhaps the ocean could be a transport route close by. Pasturage, for livestock, it means your animals can eat. Fuel for warmth and cooking, that would also be trees, forests, that sort of thing. Soil quality, I think we've covered. Relief and drainage is also the availability of water, but also you don't want to be in an area that floods easily. And then this is a lovely one. I like this word. Climate conducive to farming. So it means it's a climate that in which you can farm. And then defense, something we don't think of often. It would be like the example here is a hilltop that is easy to defend. We've got a super example in South Africa, and that is Mapungubwe. Up on Mapungubwe Hill, where the king lived, and that was easily defensible. So people couldn't get to the king to do him any harm. A lot of these site factors don't really have much relevance anymore. Town planners and city planners have got other agendas. For example, you don't need to be near building materials to be able to live somewhere. If you need building materials today, you would order them and they would be delivered. Also, surface water. Water can be piped into an area. You can get water from a borehole. Our own example here in Polokwane, we have no dams or rivers close by. The nearest big dam that we've got is Ebenezer, and that water is transported to us by a pipeline. Other than that, Polokwane uses boreholes. So the last slide that we're going to look at here is the difference between rural and urban settlements. Rural settlements, small settlements, small population, and they're mostly involved in primary activities. So if we talk about primary activities, that would be fishing, farming, and forestry. Not really mining, but mining is also one of the primary activities. So then we say that this area is unifunctional. Uni being one. So urban areas, much bigger population, and people are involved here in secondary, tertiary, and quaternary activities. So it's more than one type of function, so we call that then a multifunctional settlement. We're going to get back to these terms, the secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. We're going to get back to them when we do economic geography. Another obvious difference, other than the structure and infrastructure and so on, is lifestyle. Urban living is associated with a faster lifestyle, a lot of technology, people are chasing their careers, there's high population density, lots of people living in one place, and rural living is characterized a lot more by the sort of more laid-back farming communities, close-knit communities, less technology and so on. Although even some of these ideas are changing because a lot of rural areas are now becoming tourist attractions as well. So there have to be things like running water, electricity, and of course, Wi-Fi. So that's it. Thank you, Great Ones.